Okay, I will call the meeting, regular council meeting to order. For those of you who do watch our video, just by way of explanation, we have gone back to full electronic meetings in order to minimize contact and particularly council members coming in and out of City Hall in order to protect our staff. So this is a fully electronic meeting, and the first time, quite frankly, that I haven't been in the Fraser room where our staff are in order to also equalize the exposure to staff. I'm chairing the meeting from at home. So if we do have some technical glitches, you'll have to be patient with us. So with that, I'll call the meeting to order and recognize that we all are still on the traditional territory of the LHTAKO DENE people in our various abodes, and ask for adoption of the regular meeting minutes of December the 1st.
Excuse me, Mayor, we need to approve the agenda.
My apologies, Gina. And could you just go over the late agenda items, please?
So late agenda item under I2, the PSP December 9th meeting, Chair Summary Report, Mayor Simpson to report. Late agenda item I3 sub 2, CRD board highlights from December 11th meeting. Mayor, did you want to discuss those or stand those down?
I think stand them down because I haven't been able to find it online. We can bring that to our next meeting.
Okay. And then late agenda attachment K3, city staff report, which is Baker Creek Freshet Response Plan, additional photographs of Baker Creek, which will be screen shared tonight. And then late agenda item M1, correspondence, a letter from the Cornell resident Janice McRae regarding lack of action on Baker Creek bank protection.
Okay, thank you. With that in mind, can I have a motion to approve the agenda? Councillor Elliott, Councillor Paul, all in favor? Any opposed? So I'm going to take it that I will, because sometimes it's hard and sometimes there are delays with hands, etc. So I will go back to asking for any opposed, and we'll just do it that way, okay? So then, adoption of the regular council meeting minutes of December the 1st. Motion to adopt. Councillor Goulet, Councillor Vic. Any questions or comments? Anyone opposed? That's been passed. And adoption of the special electronic council meeting of December 9th. And that was when we met with UNBC and went over their design concept for Caribou Field. I think I saw Councillor Runge, Councillor Rudenberg. Anyone opposed? Thank you. So moving on to committee reports, Policy and Bylaw Committee, Chair Runge.
Thank you very much. So this report is to inform Council of what was discussed at the last Policy and Bylaw Committee on December 3rd, 2020. And I'm just going the three major points. We talked about the systemic racism and violence against Indigenous people in Cornell. We had an open discussion. We looked at a plan of work. 3 points that we covered there. 1, consider signing on to the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights Indigenous People and calls of action for Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And we've assigned people in the organization to come up with things for further discussion, as is in the report. My apologies. Number 2, to develop and adopt an anti-racism strategy for the city of Cornell. And number 3, to conduct the anti-racism sensitivity training and improve the knowledge of staff and council actually with regarding local Indigenous culture and history. Then we moved into a closed council meeting where we had some land discussions, and finally we talked about the Northern Development Trust Initiative, the Housing Initiatives Grant. We had a discussion with about the grant, and the Director of Development Services discussed the grant opportunity through NDIT to obtain dollars per door for multi-unit residential developments. And I believe staff had a scheduled meeting with NDIT to discuss the recommended practices for this program, and we'll get a report from that, I think, later. That's everything. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions or comments on the PABCOM? I'm not seeing anybody's hands up. Thank you for chairing that. Okay, with respect to the board highlights,
Mayor, I think you were going to do your Public Safety and Policing Committee.
Oh, sorry. Am I blowing past that?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, because it's the late. So I'm working off of an electronic version. and because it's late, it's not embedded in the electronic version. The PSP took a look at kind of the current crime stats and where we're at with that. As all of council knows, these are a real bugbear for us and for the community because of how poorly they position us. In the past, we have basically all just fumed and railed against Stats Canada and then hoped that somehow we could convince Stats Canada to stop doing what they're doing. So what PSP is suggesting we do this time is sit down with our communications team and figure out how we can lock in a much better story that can be provided as part of our visitor and resident retention. Give it to individuals, companies like West Fraser, et cetera, that they can use, get the Chamber of Commerce and the Downtown Business Association involved, but really tell our story in a better light and also explain why there's these egregious errors in the statistics. I think that's a better course of action for us, where we can point people to, if they challenge us, you know, it's a crime city, we can point people to an actual explanation of what's really going on. The trend line is in the positive direction, but they did change how they do, again, some of the statistics. And so we would have been in a much more positive direction if they hadn't made those changes. So we've just got a nominal change to the positive. So, you know, that's the key part of that discussion. We also had a discussion of, you know, sort of where we're at with this movement on the decriminalization, because I believe in the new year, we're going to be pushed as a council to weigh in and take a position on that, given what the city of Vancouver is doing. And given how many major players are saying that decriminalization of illicit drugs is the answer. So we're going to just keep that on our watch list. And if necessary, we'll put a good brief together for council. At the end of the day, our discussion is that decriminalization really doesn't address any of the systemic issues. As long as the drugs have to be obtained through criminal means, that still deals with our public safety issues and crime under 5,000. And also it doesn't address the fact that these street drugs are poisoned and that it's the fentanyl and those street drugs that's killing people. So just simply decriminalizing the drug user for nominal use of drugs doesn't address any of the systemic issues. But we're just keeping a watch on that. We'll get something in front of council if we do get a request, as I suspect we will get a request to weigh in as a council on this initiative. And because I can't see the report, I believe there was one other item we discussed that escapes me at the moment. Maybe one of the other members can speak to it, or the city manager. What do I have in my report there?
No, I think you covered it off, Mr. Mayor.
The main ones?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments around those two items then? Go ahead, Councillor Paul.
Yes, thank you. With regard to the skewed statistics from Stats Can, I'm just wondering if there would be any value in reaching out to other communities that suffer the same fate as we do, where we have crime statistics that are skewed by virtue of the fact, in part, that we have more people living outside of our municipality than we do in.
Yeah, so I think, Councillor Paul, we will still pursue those avenues. So I'm on a mayor's call tomorrow about the municipal policing agreements, and part of the discussion there will be the crime statistics and what they do to our community profile. So absolutely, we'll continue to pursue those other avenues. Doing the communications piece is not, we're not going to abandon the lobby efforts. We'll still talk to the Solicitor General. We'll still talk to whoever needs to be talked to try and get a remedy. This is just an addition, something that we haven't done, where we just do something more deliberate about telling our own story. Okay, Councillor Elliott.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I feel strongly that the communications piece is just huge. Instead of us trying to defend the city, which you know, many of us have been doing for years, just to have a place to point people to explain it all over and over again. I think it's very, very helpful. But to Councillor Paul's point too, I think getting everybody on board as we move forward can only be beneficial for us and everybody that's in our position.
Yeah, but I think we ought to keep in mind that, you know, Councillor Paul, you can, you know, tell us how far back this goes, but, you know, I do recall Mayor Steve Wallace being on Arsenio Hall arguing this, and that has to be back in what, the late 80s, early 90s, and it became an American, you know, phenomenon that Cornell was the crime capital of North America at that time. And he got into an argument with Arsenio Hall that lasted 2 or 3 nights on that talk show. So, you know, the argument up to the statisticians in Stats Canada has had no effect whatsoever. But I think part of our communications discussion will also be things like, as Councillor Paul noted in a previous meeting, the pop-up ads about, is Cornell a safe place, that's reading your IP address and then taking it to these stories. We're getting better at trying to figure out the workarounds. So if somebody is searching, is Cornell a safe place, we can bump, you know, our communications up by using some of the tools available to us. So it would be a proactive strategy, not just a passive one, that we're going to talk about in the new year and see what we can do to at least reframe and have that alternate reality presented to people. Okay. Any other questions or comments on that one? Okay. Where are we at now? Sorry, I'm just learning how to use all the electronic stuff. I usually work off of all the paper stuff. Now Caribou Regional District Board highlights. You can see the highlights for yourself there with respect to that meeting. It was predominantly a business meeting for the area directors, nothing of note specific to council. Questions or comments? Councillor Paul?
Yes, thank you very much. With regard to the, oh, I don't know. Hang on a minute. I killed my video. There I am.
There you go.
With regard to the email from Bob Cummings, CEO of Central Mountain Air, dated November 24, did he make any comment or allude at all to the future of Central Mountain Air service for Cornell and Williams Lake?
No. I think, quite frankly, at this point, none of them know. Right. And one of the things that's come up just on that point, and we talked about it briefly there, is that even if the passengers come back, the pilots may not. So I think people, if you're paying attention to the news, there's quite a lot of news around what's happening with pilots, because many pilots are ending up not getting the flight hours that they need, and so may end up getting decertified if they don't keep it up. That's pushing the senior pilots to take early retirement. They're not going to sort of hang on and then have to go through a hard recertification process. And we already had issues associated with pilots that was impinging on the CMA schedule before that potential wave of pilots comes out of the system. So there's no intelligence. It was just kind of, thank you for sending us the letter. We're all struggling with what's going on.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, the board highlights for the 4th do contain one error related to Cornell, where it talks about right near the top of those, a contracting services agreement between the CCRHD and the Cornell Community Economic Development Corporation, and that's the physician recruitment and retention program. Of course, the Cornell Community Economic Development Corporation does not exist anymore. That contract is with the city of Cornell.
Yeah. Yeah, and thanks for catching that, because the dialogue at the board table was City of Cornell, because it had been corrected. I didn't realize when I scanned this for highlights that that the error was embedded in the news release. Okay, we good to move on? All right, moving into city staff reports. Director Bolden.
Thank you. So the purpose of this report is to request council to proceed with the first two readings of the Downtown Cornell Business Improvement Area Bylaw 1900. So this bylaw is a council initiative bylaw subject to petition against. So the Downtown Cornell BIA bylaw expired in 2020, and the group has come forward requesting a 2-year extension and boundary expansion. After the first two readings of this bylaw, staff will mail to all the businesses in the respective BIA the budgets and plans with an estimate of their costs and instructions for the petition. We'll do this mail out in January after Christmas. Staff will also advertise the process in the local paper, and any businesses within the BIAs opposing the continuation of the BIA or the boundary expansion will have 30 days after to notify City Hall of their opposition. So the recommendation is that council proceed with the first two readings of the City of Cornell Downtown Cornell Business Improvement Area Bylaw 1900 in the bylaw section of the agenda.
So, and again, this is already a received report, so we don't need to do anything with it. There's just any questions for Director Bolton, then we'll deal with the bylaw in the bylaw section. I'm not seeing any hands. Thank you, Director Bolton. Moving on to the next staff report, Healthcare Recruitment Program Update, Manager Reed. You're on mute, you're muted.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Okay, so the purpose of this report is to provide an update to council regarding the city's healthcare recruitment program and the new agreement with the Caribou Regional Hospital District, as was just in the highlights. So the city's contract with the CCRHD for the provision of physician and health professional recruitment and retention in the Cornell area expired in 2019 and was extended for 1 year to the end of 2020. In October, the CCRHD released an RFP for proponents to bid on provision of services for the North Caribou, Central and South Caribou, or for the whole region. The City of Cornell submitted a proposal for the North Caribou and has been awarded this contract. Included in this agreement are identical deliverables to the previous agreement. The new agreement also includes an increased budget for the Healthcare Recruitment Coordinator contract position and an agreement to share the cost of any loss incurred in the renting and subletting of the apartment for physicians and healthcare professionals in the Kekanaw building. The Healthcare Recruitment Coordinator will otherwise continue to welcome healthcare professionals and their families and support their settlement in Cornell.
Okay. Questions or comments? Okay, so just by way of an update for reference, because I'm the chair of the Caribou Regional Hospital District, we're the only ones that currently have a contract under this function of the CCRHD, the health district, or the hospital district rather. And that was a function of the Division of Family Practice was running the South and Central version of this, and the board was not satisfied with that contractor because by their nature, they were focused on primary care physicians only to the exclusion of all other healthcare practitioners. So we've been working with Interior Health to try and figure out an alignment. And the board really considers what we're doing here in Cornell as what they want to see replicated in South and Central. They figure that we're the Cadillac version and that's what they want to replicate. So at the last board meeting for the CCRHD, we've come up with a bit of a game plan to approach the District of 100 Mile House, the City of Williams Lake, and if they're willing to pick it up and model it along our lines, then so be it. If not, we're going to go to independent requests for proposals in those two communities. So, you know, kudos to Amy and her team and the contractor doing this, that we've got a renewed contract for 3 years. So this program has stability. We've got some risk management coverage in this contract for the accommodations that we didn't have before, which was a request of council to get that partnership in place. And that, you know, the board considers this to be a true class act approach to this. And they're very, very happy with what's going on in the North Caribou. So I've been charged as the chair, along with Vice Chair Director Al Richmond, to try and replicate our program as much as possible in South and Central Caribou as well. So kudos, Amy, to you and your team for such a good program.
Thanks.
Okay, questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you, Amy. I appreciate that. Okay, next agenda item is the administration report for Baker Creek, the freshet response. And again, on that item, that we've got some pictures, but I would also like council to take into consideration correspondence item M1. So we're receiving that correspondence item by accepting it as part of our agenda. So that correspondence item should be considered in our dialogue because it's pertinent to this item. And then we can respond back to the individual regarding council's decisions regarding this item. So over to you, City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I would like to start by saying Director Coben is online. So if there is technical issues with this report, I would pass it over to him to answer those questions. We do have some pictures which accompany this report. So at points in time, we will flip into the pictures and then I presume flip them off again so that you can, Mr. Mayor, you can still see who's responding from council.
Yeah.
So Gina and I will work that part hopefully seamlessly. So just getting into the report then, there's, I hate to say it, but there's a bit of a minor error right in the title of the report. It says Baker Creek Freshet Response Plan. It's actually the recovery plan. So just so you understand the difference, they're technical terms. Response is what happens during an emergency. We're responding. Recovery is where we're trying to bring our systems back up to normal again and to what it was before the emergency. So response versus recovery. So the purpose of this report is to outline to council the recovery plan resulting from the damages caused during the Baker Creek freshet event of 2020. This plan will result in a sewer main line which will have a much lower risk of future damage and lower risk of potential environmental damage from future breaks. That is because the sewer line will be relocated away from the Baker Creek bed and up to a different location, which is not nearly so subject to erosion damage. Unfortunately, there may be some impacts on properties which are located on the Baker Creek waterfront. So this report is just going to talk about the technical aspects, give a bit of a summary of the damage which occurred, talk about what the options were for recovery, and then what we're choosing to do. So, and you'll note, Mr. Mayor, that I wrote the whole report into the summary. So basically I get to go word for word through the report as opposed to
Point of order. I think it's a standard rule that doesn't happen. You can assume council's read it. Highlights only, please.
Okay, so damage summary. Perhaps the best way to start on the damage summary, assuming council has read this then, is with some of the pictures of the actual property below Hutchcroft. It is the focal point of this report, is the properties along Hutchcroft Street, which have, where the there's been some significant erosion of the river and where the sewer main line was washed away. So what we're going to do is we're going to flip into 3 pictures that really explain what that problem was and what the magnitude of those problems were. After you see these 3 pictures, we will flip the presentation back off again so that we can just talk about the, oh, sorry, we're just getting this thing wiped down. There we go. Boom, 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 boom. Where are the pictures?
Go down.
Okay, first picture. This is at 473 Hutchcroft Street. So this is on the top property looking down over Baker Creek. This picture was taken yesterday. So what this shows is how close the erosion has come and how badly this bank is going. And this is the shed on the side of the building. We'll see this shed and some time release photos will point it out. That'll come later in this presentation where you see how much the river has actually moved. So interesting enough, there was some wood parked or piled here beside the property and some pieces of plywood. Just recently they were there. And as of yesterday, they are now down the bank. So that was the first picture. This is to give some a frame of reference to that. So here's the river below. This is Baker Creek. There's that one piece. Can you guys see my my little pointer there? There's a piece of plywood which a short while ago was up against the side of the building. I can't confirm how long ago, but it wasn't all that long ago. It was up against the side of the building. Interesting to note, this is after a pretty fresh snowfall, and yet the areas where there's bare dirt indicate that there's still some movement of the soils. And in particular, you look at this one, this little bank here, and it really is indicative of the soil types there, which are very kind of sandy pockets and gravelly, which you would expect along a creek, but they don't hold themselves very well. They have a tendency to slide. So that's picture number 2. And that the attempt of that is just to see the size of that. And picture number 3 is a bit further back, so you get that idea of scale. Here's our fire chief there. He's a regular inspection point. He checks that thing out quite carefully on a regular basis. This section along here where my pointer is the remains of the old trailway where we had the sewer main line located, and there was a trail along there. It actually connects up over to here at this corner site, and it used to be a straight shot across there, and it's completely gone. So it gives you an idea of how much slippage there has been and how much the trees have moved. The few remaining trees, these ones up here up top, are just hanging on for bare life there. They're just hanging on by the root tips. I presume a strong wind will push those down and maybe take more of the bank down with them. So that's the current situation. And this is the lady, Mrs. McCrae, who sent us the letter, which is part of this agenda. That's her property. She's been there for I believe it's 40 some years. She's been at that location. So a long time. And this is her property is the focal point there. So having seen those, I'm going to actually go back to the regular presentation. Gina, how do we minimize that? We'll come back to some more pictures in a few minutes. So the freshet summary, significant erosion and washing away of the sanitary sewer line, 145 meters of sewer main washed away. That's significant. Fortunately, the actual sewer into the creek was very minimal because that was just before it broke. They managed to shut that line off. So very minimal and not a lot of pollution created. As council is aware, we had a large trash pump in there and lots of temporary sewer lines that were carrying that sewer for most of the summer. At this point in time, we're trucking a lot of that sewer because there's less volume during the winter because there's less infiltration into the ground of groundwater. Erosion to the main sewer access route. And you can see it's more than just erosion. It was actually washed away that sewer access road on the bottom. There was a few other minor areas, which the east end of Beaubien Avenue, the riverfront trail downstream of Beaubien Avenue was damaged. And then many trees went down. And interestingly enough, this year, significant amounts of very large trees. So large poplar trees and cottonwood trees went down. Typically with runoffs, you expect to see the smaller trees that have grown up in the past few years along the river, the creek edges, but this year some really large trees, and some of those are still in the creek, by the way. So what we did get permission to do was to cut some of those into smaller pieces, still left them in the creek as per what DFO likes to have trees in creek because it's part of habitat for fisheries purposes, but we cut them into smaller pieces so if they find their way under the bridge at Anderson there, they'll hopefully wash through under the bridge instead of hanging up on the bridge. So recovery options, fundamentally two options to do with the sewer line. Can replace it, can put it back exactly where it was, which would involve trying to rebuild the roadway in there, bringing in a bunch of material, trying to stabilize the bank, trying to put some riprapping up. And also involved, there's some of that old piping was on trespass. So we never did get proper right-of-way. So there would potentially be some purchases of lands or formal negotiation of right-of-ways. So quite a complex project and lots of geotech issues with that project. Or the other option is to do a relocate away from Baker Creek, which would involve the installation of a lift station and then some other sewer lines as well. So the team working on this was Chris and his team of people from Public Works, who are the eyes and ears and the experience on the ground. Urban Systems provided a lot of engineering advice. In addition, the DFA folks have their own engineering people involved, and EMBC was also engaged. So between that team, we decided, and the city was still the main decider, that we will proceed with the relocation of the sewer line away from Baker Creek. Has the following benefits. It eliminates the potential for damage due to another event like this last year. This, from a city perspective, we have no way of predicting when we're going to get these extreme high water events, but they seem to be getting more often. And if we have the opportunity to move that, it just seems the appropriate answer to do so. No purchases of lands required under this option or access agreements. The impact of that is it means that we actually have a higher proportion of a funded project. Because purchasing lands would not be an eligible cost for the DFA. So more and more, you end up paying more and more out of your own pocket if we were to try to relocate or try to go back to the existing site. In addition, the proposal to relocate gives us greater cost certainty, and there's less concerns about actually doing work in the creek. It's difficult to do work in creek. It's very regulated. So that's the decision made. So that's one part that we're asking council, and feel free to ask Chris technical questions about how this was evaluated. But we are asking council for a confirmation of that component. We took this to ECOM for a discussion, and we told ECOM that we, at a staff level, staff and consulting level, we've made this decision and we would like to be ratified, and ECOM agreed that they felt that that was the appropriate action to take, and so we're bringing that back for a ratification of our decision on that. So, Mr. Mayor, we can go through the rest of the report now, or talk to that one decision first, or maybe you need to see that impact portion first before you can make that.
I think the council should be apprised of the impact portion, because that's really why we're being asked to sign off on a technical piece, because it has a public and property impact.
Okay, great. So I will continue right on then. The impact on residential properties, by choosing the relocation option, it means the old sewer main route will not be rebuilt. This is a one or the other. We can't do both. DFA's mandate is to fund us to get back to normal operations. Their mandate is not to do proactive bank armoring or improvements to try to protect residents. So they will choose, they will go along with the option that we chose. And in the end, it was a lower cost option, what we chose, than the other one. And they support that option. But again, it's one or the other. So the old pathway along Baker Creek in which the pipe was formerly placed will not be rebuilt. That pathway served as a buffer to protect the properties adjacent to it from high water erosion. Without this protection, some properties on Hutchcroft Street and along that area may be at a higher risk than they were previously. Again, that's a may. We cannot predict the future weather events, but that's a may be at a higher risk than they were previously. Based on their own parameters, the DFA may pay homeowners compensation if they are forced from their homes because the home gets too damaged to safely reside in. And that's a pretty important point. They are the agency charged with trying to make it okay for homeowners. They're not going to try to go in and protect the bank, but if a homeowner has lost their home, the use of their home due to erosion, there is a potential to get paid out from the DFA, disaster financial assistance. Now, that's not a for sure thing. The DFA looks at the circumstances, looked at the home as it looked at whether the homeowner could have mitigated those damages and done anything to prevent it. But it's fairly likely, I would suggest, that if this particular home is lost, that there's a strong chance of payment. Now, the DFA does not pay out based on the full value. They pay out on the value of the home, not the land value. So I would suggest that a homeowner would probably feel that they're not getting what they feel the property is actually worth. That's pure speculation, but an assumption on my part. So as discussed a few times, the unknown factor here around the risk is how long. We don't know that because it's not just the amount of snow in a year, it's the snow accumulation, it's how fast it melts off, and then there's a number of other factors that we're not even sure of. For example, what I've heard is that the 2020 levels of the freshet was not the highest level we've recently seen with Baker Creek, but it did the most damage. So how do you put those two together? I'm not sure, but I think what it says is that rivers are unpredictable and the damage from rivers are unpredictable. So I don't think we could say with any level of certainty that this is what we can expect to see next year or the year after. I think that would be presumptive. The cost of armoring the section of Baker Creek, where there is most erosion below Hutchcroft Street, an order of magnitude estimate is $1 million. Again, that's not based on detailed engineering work. If we want detailed engineering work on that, that would be a project in itself involving geotechs, engineering. I think that would be a pretty expensive and time-consuming study to do that work. So that number is based on an estimate based on distances and how much armoring costs and how much it costs to move earth and all the rest. So up to $1 million, nice round number, but I think it's an expensive project. We can say that for sure. The geotechnical issues with it, very difficult. As council is aware, we've been getting a number of inquiries from residents on both sides of Baker Creek asking what the city is doing to protect their properties. We're going to talk about that a bit more as we get into the policy discussion. But city staff, myself and the fire chief, did meet with this particular homeowner who sent us a letter. And our primary concern was to make sure that she fully understands and that her family fully understands the dangers that could be once the water comes back up, and that they're ready to evacuate, and that in particular, that machine shed, which is on the corner of the property, they need to get their stuff removed from that ASAP and because we don't know what's going to happen with that. We can't predict a time frame. So we told her that and just made sure that they were ready for this coming year. Our primary concern is resident safety, and we don't back down from that at all. That will always be our primary concern. The future risk from Baker Creek to city infrastructure. So that's a very interesting question, and I think it's been, many people say, well, if we don't armor the creek here, it's going to spread to this property, go upstream, go downstream, and it's going to end up taking out that whole corner of Hutchcroft Street. I think that's a presumption. The approach being taken with Baker Creek is based on the assumption that once the sewer main line is relocated, the imminent risk to city infrastructure is reduced. This assumption, of course, is based on the unpredictable nature of river erosion, and there are a lot of unknowns. but there is actually a section later in the report I'll go through. It's in the background section if council wants to see it, which talks about which infrastructure would be remaining. So I think what I would like to do would be to actually flip into the ortho photos, and they're a bit weak. It's hard to get really clear ortho photos, but just to show the damage progression over the last 10 years. And we will actually flip to the oldest picture here, which is from 2010. And here it is. Here's the property that we're talking about right here. That's 473 Hutchcroft. That's the little shed that we talk about. There's the, right there is Baker Creek, and you can see there's no real encroachment. Looks like there's a fair bit of real estate between these properties. 2019, still a fair bit of real estate. You can see this. That was the old pathway there. April 30th of 2020, you can see it's starting to get chewed out here at the bank. And this is a pretty high water time, and you can see the trees in the river. You can see how close well, it's actually hard to see how close, but you can definitely see it's eating this part of the river up. And finally, September 30th, and the quality of this picture is a little tough because it's dark. But again, you see there's like 2 trees left there. And we saw in that one picture earlier, a couple of trees barely hanging on for dear life at the top of the bank. So you can see that the difference between this picture versus all the way back down to the bottom again, that picture right there is phenomenal. That's how much that creek is moving. So I think that's it for the pictures that I will show, unless there's any discussion you want to have about the actual infrastructure. There's one more slide that you have in your report which shows where the water lines and sewer lines are. But what it does bear out is the fact that city infrastructure, once that sewage line is relocated, will not be at risk, we don't feel, for quite a number of years. Thanks, Gina. If you could just click that back to the report then. So if I could just touch on, with your permission, a little bit of the policy type questions. And that's really the heart of this issue. When you have an incident like this, council and the city really needs to fall back on policy. What does your policy say you're going to do in a given situation? It's what drives it. It's also what takes I guess some of the emotional response where we want to get in there and help. It forces you to think about it from a logical policy perspective. We set the policy at a time where we don't have the pressing issues right in front of us. So we do that at a time when we can perhaps think more, I don't know if it's rationally, but at least more dispassionately about an issue. So with regards to policy, the emergency response work done under a state of local emergency that follows policy as well, but it's not our policy. The policy around that is Emergency Management BC sets the policy. And the way that they set that policy is we get pre-approval for all the types of work we're going to be doing. We get approval from them, usually just based on a phone call. They say, yeah, go ahead and do that. And then we submit for that work that we do. So they set those policies, that response policies. But where people get confused is they'll see the city working all over the place, right? We're rip-wrapping little sections of the river. We're in, we're out, we're moving all around. People think, wow, the city can do whatever they want with us. That is under a state of local emergency, where our number one concern is protection of people, protection of properties, protection of infrastructure, but it gives us a higher level of being able to get in there and get the job done. And the fixes we do under that state of local emergency, they're quick responses because we're in a hurry. We move from one spot to the next to the next. So, and they're based on setting local priorities. on protecting local priorities, but they're not the long-term solutions. So we talked earlier about the difference between response versus recovery. So the long-term work is once the emergency's over, the river has subsided, the banks have stabilized for now, the people, life is starting to get back to normal. What's the recovery policy around that? And we do have our own policy to fall back on around the long-term recovery work. First off, we have a local services policy. Where our services policy is, the intent behind that is to determine what will council do for services that are going to benefit a particular geographical area in the community. So the intent behind that one is that we would look at it, we would say, okay, for this geographical area, for example, that section of Hutchcross Street, if that project was to cost $1 million, should the council do it? If we're going to engage in this, and should the city do this? If we're going to engage, what would be the rules around engagement? So we set that policy in our local services policy. And in that local services policy, we talk about types of local service areas, including if we want to do retaining walls or armoring along rivers and creek banks. And the owner's share is 100%, we set as per policy. We also have an asterisk beside it, and the asterisk says, in the case of erosion due to flowing water, if any of the city's infrastructure is at risk, including utility systems or roads, the city will contribute a proportion it feels reasonable to protect its infrastructure. So that's what's changed in this situation. Our infrastructure is moving out. We will no longer have that sewer main line in there. So we no longer have the infrastructure to worry about, which if you just follow the policy would suggest that the owner's share should be somewhere near 100%. Now, is there some other, there may be little bits and pieces of infrastructure, little bits, but nothing major in there. So that's the way we work with this, is that when we've suffered significant damage as a result of an emergent situation, we apply to DFA for funding. Between this external federal funding and our own reserves, we repair infrastructure damages and mitigate future damages where possible. But it's important to note the city will not spend money on mitigative measures unless the city infrastructure is at imminent risk. In this particular situation, there's no city infrastructure remaining at imminent risk because the relocation of the main line reduces that risk. So the other question that does come up is whether the city should be applying for grants to help individual property owners. So maybe if the city doesn't do this, maybe the city should apply for grants. Well, we've already heard that the DFA will not fund this. Right? The DFA will not fund this because they're only interested, and their mandate is to see city infrastructure back up and running. So but there are other grants. There's grants that come out from time to time where there is funding for mitigation for these type of issues. So, and I don't say this to be cheeky, but sometimes it's politically expedient to apply for grants. You know, even if you think the chances are low, it gives us the chance to say, hey, well, we applied for a grant and maybe it wasn't successful. So it can be politically expedient to apply for grants, but that I believe can lead to false hopes among homeowners. The problem that we would have with this type of project is how to choose projects which should be the ones that the city applies for grant funding for. That's one of the issues, how to choose those projects. If you look around this community, we have rivers galore. We've got the Fraser, we've got the Cornell, we've got Baker Creek. They all have potential issues. In addition to that, there's slippage issues where homeowners, we had some come to us last year, homeowners come and say, well, can you help me? I need to stabilize the banks around my property. And we said, no, we can't help you. And some of those there's no types of bank stabilization that comes cheaply. So they're all expensive to the homeowners. So, and we said no to those because we have a policy which says no. So the question around grants is, it's again a political issue, really. It's a political decision. But at any given time, there are so many properties that our recommendation would be that we would not apply for funding to mitigate natural issues unless there is city infrastructure to protect, or if when the benefit is widespread. So by widespread benefit, I'm thinking about a diking program. You know, if we can, and we heard from Urban Systems just recently about our flood protection and how we need maybe some new dikes in some areas. That's a bit of a different situation. If you can spend some money and provide some protection to a large number of homeowners and maybe put in a local service area to help them to pay their share and protect some city infrastructure, those type of grants where there's more benefit for the amount spent certainly do make sense. And I'm not opposed to applying for those when appropriate ones come on stream. But in this case, I don't think that it's appropriate to apply in this case. In the financial implications, it just talks about the funding here. Replacement of a sewer line, we think that's going to cost $2 million with an estimate that DFA is going to fund $1.4 million. Repair of storm sewer and trails, we think is going to cost 200 with DFA funding 160,000. And we spent over 500,000 in emergency response costs, which is fully funded by EMBC or near to fully funded by EMBC. So concludes my report, Mr. Mayor, with the exception of the recommendation. Would you like to hear that, or the questions first, or how would you like to proceed?
Let's complete the report. So let's do the recommendations, then we'll open up the floor with the full report in front of us.
Okay, so the recommendations. First off, this report is primarily prepared for council and community information purposes. Staff has made the assumption that council should not be involved in the selection of the sewer mainline rebuilding option due to the highly technical nature of that decision. The DFA funder must also concur with the solution selected by the city, and they have with the relocation solution. Well, when this discussion was held with the executive committee, they agreed with that determination. Because a resolution of council may be useful from a future liability perspective, council suggests the following: that council approves the staff recommendation that the sewer main line that was damaged in the Baker Creek 2020 freshet be relocated, and that council directs staff to inform the potentially impacted residents about the existing policies related to city works on private property, specifically that the city will not fund those works. And if I may add, the point behind that final resolution is again around public safety, that they know that they're in a volatile area and to be prepared. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So I would either invite a motion or we just go into discussion. Councillor Elliott, are you moving the recommendation? Seconder for the recommendation, Councillor Vic. Floor is open for discussion with a view towards adopting the recommendation as proposed by staff. Any hands? Okay, I see none. I think just a general comment that I would have is, I think if you look at the map of the proposed route for the sewer line, given how much erosion is occurring where the old sewer line was, I think we would be in serious breach of our fiduciary function and negligent if we contemplated putting the sewer line back along the creek. I don't think we have any option there. And I think sticking to our policy is the right thing to do. So on the recommendation then, again, I see no hands up. Anyone opposed? That recommendation has passed. Thank you, City Manager, for the comprehensive report. And I sure, on behalf of all of council, we feel for the residents there, and we get their pain, and it's really unfortunate that this circumstance has arisen. Okay, moving on back onto the agenda then. Bear with me 1 second. Okay, with respect to the agenda then, we've dealt with the correspondence as part of this report. Does anybody have anything further on the correspondence item from the resident whose property was in question and noted all the pictures are relative to their property? Questions or comments? Okay, so that correspondence is just part of our record now. With respect to bylaws, bylaw 1900, Cornell Downtown Business Improvement Association, the first and second reading. As per the report we had, Councillor Elliott so moved, Councillor Paul second. Questions or comments? All in favor? Sorry, any opposed? I'll get used to this electronic medium. And then with respect to changes to upcoming meeting schedule, none. Our next meeting, of course, will be in the new year now. No changes to committee appointments, any announcement of future events. Councillor Rudenberg.
Thank you. So it's almost that time of the year. We have a community member once again this year stepping up and providing food for our community on Christmas Eve day. It's looking somewhat different than it has in the past. It's not a sit-down hot turkey meal. What we've done is rejigged everything, and it is a basically everything will be served outside, and it's basically a lunch to go. So this is being hosted on December 24th from 11 till 2 p.m. at the Cornell Senior Center. It's at no cost to anyone. We'll provide a box lunch for them, basically turkey sandwich, etc. They'll get some sweets, a drink, hot chocolate if they like. There'll also be a little gift there for them. And all the COVID protocols have been put in place for this with discussions with the public health unit, etc. So masks are required. We will have them there. We also have hand sanitizer. We'll be marking out 6 feet for everybody to stand as they move through the line. Like I said, we've kind of rejigged everything to work with COVID, knowing that this type of event was allowed. There are no public washrooms available, and it is an outdoor event. That's all that people have to remember. So again, we'd like to thank the City of Cornell. There is free busing that day for people. So thank you very much to the City of Cornell. And we have other sponsors that have allowed us to once again put this community event on. So everyone is welcome, and please bring a friend.
Any other announcements, future events? So just a quick announcement of the NASCO First Nations election. So I'd like to congratulate new Chief Leah Stump and thank Chief Alec for the work that we've done with him, and look forward to continuing our collaborative relationship with the NASCO First Nation. And just a comment on Christmas, as council will read in my column and the video that we did today. Anybody who watches our meeting all the way to the end, I do plead with them to adhere to the spirit and intent of the public health orders that we've been asked to work with. As people may be aware, the Prince George Hospital is at the point of potentially being overwhelmed. Other communities in the north are also reaching critical points, to the point that a critical care team was flown into one of them to help out. And so far, Cornell has been doing quite well, and we need to continue that. So I do ask everybody to remain home, keep your bubble small, find creative ways to enjoy maintaining contact with family during this period of time. And I think, as I say in my column, the best gift that we could give everyone this Christmas is the gift of health, and that gift of health is with us doing some sacrifice with our normal Christmas and New Year's activities. So council, I wish you all the best. This will be the last time we convene as a council. and staff, and to the residents of Cornell and our constituents, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And I hope it is truly a safe one and one that you make wonderful because you find creative ways to do so. With that, I would ask for a motion to adjourn. Don't everybody jump up at once. Councillor Paul, Councillor Runge, so moved. I don't believe we're going to get anybody in opposition to this, but just in case, anybody in opposition? Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you to staff for the meeting tonight.